Hello, let me give you a quick introduction to the normal mapping challenge project. This will be mainly just using for planar normal maps. We're going to go from high poly assets to low poly assets and then also planars as well. And so what I want to do is for your assignment is to take the wireframe that is a high poly smooth to a high poly mesh, create a low poly mesh with UVs and also the plane, and then bake out normal maps for these objects. For the baking, we're going to use a plugin for Maya called Turtle. If Turtle is not loaded, so if you go to render using and it's not on this list, that means we need to activate it. To activate it, we need to go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager. Under Plugin Manager, if you scroll down the list, you'll see a thing that says Turtle MTL MLL. Just go ahead and do Load, Auto Load, and then we can refresh it and hit Close. Alright, so and this will load the Turtle rendering engine, which if we go to our settings now, we can change this to the Turtle renderer, and it has a new Turtle tab, which when we hit the render button right here, you'll see that it'll just render out the image. What we're going to do is we're going to end up using the baking tab. Alright, so for this first set of shapes, I've created all the geometry you need for you. Only thing that you'll need to do is just go through the process of baking the maps. So before we do that, let's go to UV editor and make sure that our plane object has good UVs and also our low poly object has good UVs. In this case, this low poly here looks like it does not. So if we turn on checkerboard, you'll see that we're end up with a mess. So let's generate some UVs for the low poly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to either on the toolkit tab, create planar, or I can go to the create menu planar, and let's go to the option box. And I want to make sure that this is set up along the Y direction. So hit Y and then hit apply. And so now you'll see that we have our nice grid square of UVs. We could take it further with some relax, or unfold, but I think this will suffice for right now. Alright, so let's go to object mode. Alright, so now what we need to do is, now that we have our shape and we have our UVs, then we will have our, let me get rid of the high poly real quick. What I'm going to do is we'll have our frame, our cage, that when we hit 3, we'll do a proxy smooth. Now, with the baking process, the proxy smooth will not work for baking, so what we're going to need to do is create an actual high poly. So what I'm going to do is Control D and then create a duplicate of that, hit 1 again, and then I'm going to go to Mesh, Smooth, and then Divisions, we'll crank that up to about 3, which gives us a nice smooth result. So if we look at our proxy smooth and our smooth mesh, you'll see that they're looking the exact same, or pretty well close to the exact same. Alright, so make sure I set this right, so -12. And first thing we need to do is we'll just go ahead and do the plane bake. Okay, so for this I'm going to duplicate the plane. I'm going to move it right on top of the model here. As long as it's not penetrating through, it just needs to sit on top. And as a matter of fact, I can actually go to top view and really get this a little more exact. Alright, so now we have our target and we have our source. And so now I'm going to go to my render options and I'm going to set up Turtle. So to set up Turtle, the first thing we want to do is change this rendering to baking. For higher quality, I'm going to change my max sample rate to 4. That should be all we need to mess with. And then instead of doing global loom, environment options, all those things, all we want to do is go to the baking tab. And we have a few settings that we need to do. So the first one is that we need to set our target. The target is going to be whatever the low poly is. We'll hit the button, go to add selected, and then we can select our source. Source is going to be our high poly, so go ahead and add selected. So this is 1-to-1 target to source. I'm not going to worry too much about envelope and transfer settings and all that, but under common settings, under texture bake settings, width 512, height 512. So only thing I don't want to do is do a saved file. We'll manually save out the file, and definitely save the render view. And then where it says bilinear filter, this is fine, but edge dilation, I'm going to bring this down to 1. It's not such a big issue right now because we're going to be using just one planar material or one planar UV map, but later on having an edge dilation of higher than 1 sometimes can cause issues with bleed over. We'll look at that as examples later. Alright, so the last option that we need to do is change from full shading to normal map. If we leave full shading selected, it will render the normal map and then do a render on top of that and erase our normal map. So what we need to do is deselect full shading, select normal map, and then under advanced settings, we need to make sure that normal map is set to tangent space. There are many more options that we can do and more details we can go through, but for our current use, this is all we need. So one more time, tangent space, only normal map, edge dilation of 1, don't save it to a file, save it to render view, got our target and our source. Alright, so to render this, all we have to do is hit the render button. And you'll see that it'll create our normal map. If I turn off the sRGB, you'll see that we have our nice blues and purples. So what I'm going to do is go to File, Save Image, and we'll just say, let's put it in the normal challenge folder. Make sure you change PNG is usually, PNG is usually what I go with. You can do a PSD, JPEG. PNG is usually what I like to use with these. I'm just going to go shape 1, plain, normal, so that I know exactly what it is. And go ahead and save it. Okay. Now once we've saved it, we can then apply it. So here's my plane. Just going to move it back out of the way. I'm going to right click, go to Assign New Material. And so we want to be able to see the shine. I'm going to go ahead and hit Blend. And then we'll have our blend options. And I'll make it a little more shiny. Like so. And then we need to assign the map. So under bump mapping, I'm going to hit the checker box. Under the create render node, I'm going to hit file. From that, use as not bump, but tangent space normals. Remember, it's a tangent space normal map. And then click the bump value tab. From there, we set the image name. And then we need to find our file. So downloads. This was normal challenge, shape plane normal, and we'll open that. Now, nothing happened. Even though it is assigned, nothing happened. But if we hit 6 to do show texture, then you'll see that it will suddenly turn on. So instead of having a plane, we now have the normals of that object. Alright, so our next order of business is to convert the low poly into the high poly with the normals. Now before I bake normals, this is going to be only has a single shell for UV, so we can get away without any major edge changes. But what I want to make sure we do is go to under modeling, go to mesh display, and soften the edges. and you see how it will blend. It kind of loses its shape. It blends all of our edges together. This makes for a better normal map because we're going to allow, it's going to have smooth normals and allow the image to control things. There's more advanced things that we'll do next with different UV shells. For the moment, this should work just fine. All right, so in this case, let's go to our translate and let's move it over like so. Top view even. Line up. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the closer the better. All right, so now we have the high poly source inside of our low poly, and we want to go back to our options, and we'll just clear all. And we need to go to the target, the low poly mesh first. Add selected. Click on the high poly, add selected. Now all our other things are already set up for us for baking the normals, so we don't need to change anything. All we needed to do is change the target and change the source, and then we can hit the render button. Now this looks eerily similar to our other mesh, but you'll notice there is, or map, but you'll notice there's some kind of gradient that's kind of going on here. This is because we have more geometry in it and it's changing the tangents. So I'm going to go ahead and save this file. So save image. This will be plain, instead of plain normal, it'll be shape 1 low normal. Go ahead, hit escape on that. Give my target back. Alright, and now we're going to go ahead and so assign a new material. Blend again. And we'll just do some of the same basic settings. Go back to bump map, go to file, go to tangent space normals, and then assign the file. Make sure you label these so you'll know once we start having a lot of them, and hit open. And so here you'll see that this is our original, this is the normal map. Original, normal map. See the effect? And now this time we've actually have the same geometry. So instead of it flattening out here, we now have these beveled edges sort of baked into the object itself. All right, so for the next shape, we are going to have to do things a little bit differently because you don't have a low poly already provided. And we'll just use the duplicate of the planes. The planes should be already set up. We can go ahead and bake that, no problem. Just use the same process as before. But for this shape, what we're going to need to do is first off make our high poly. So command duplicate, slide it over, and then do a mesh and smooth. Again, about 3 divisions. And we end up with this shape. Now, part of us could probably say, oh, we could just use this as our low poly. Unfortunately, there's a few mistakes that we have that won't quite match up well. So if this was our low poly, what you'll see is that when the two overlay, we end up with a much different geometry around here versus on our high poly. So what we need to do is have more of an approximation with the low poly and the high poly. Plus, we don't need all this extra geometry around these beveled edges. So what we need to do is take this original cage and we need to make a low poly that looks closer to this without using a lot of polygons. So what I'm going to do is duplicate it. Hit 3. And then for our low poly here, let's do a mesh, and we could do we'll do a smooth. We'll just give it 1 division at the moment. And one of the things that we can do, or at least try to do with Maya, is go to the mesh and we can do a reduce and either percentage or vertex limit and dial it down to get a good reduction. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. So if I did a let's say reduce, and we're just keep reducing it. Eventually this might give us a halfway decent result. or we can go through and do it manually. This would kind of work, except we've lost a lot of that detail in the middle. So let's see if it'll add edges back a little bit. Something sort of like this might kind of work, but let's see if we can do it a little more manual. So I'm just going to undo that. There we go. So back to our normal model. I'm going to use my modeling toolkit here. And what we're basically going to want to do is hold on to the shape, but get rid of all the extra geometry. So the first thing we need to do is I'm going to look at all these beveled edges where I have extra edge loops that we can get rid of. I'm going to select all these because they're all kind of connected to each other. Select all those, Control Delete. There's another beveled edge. Control Delete to delete the vertex and the edge. Okay, we got another little wonderful bevel here. Delete that. Bevel inside here. There we go. And delete. This one and delete. Okay, so now all my bevels are gone. Now let's look at the way the geometry is set up. So I really don't need, because this is flat, I really don't need these sections, right? They're not creating any, they're not giving me anything that, as far as changing of polygonal direction. So I'll go ahead and get rid of that. And then we have these two side pieces here, which aren't really doing anything either. Right. We'll go ahead and get rid of that. Okay, this is a vertical plane here, so this edge loop, and this edge loop need not apply. This is pretty straight here with a curve down there, so I'd probably say this edge loop here can disappear no problem, and that one can disappear as well. This is very much flat. Get rid of that. I could either have done it the other way, leave the outer ones or leave the inner one. Here we have an inside convex shape, so all this can truly go away. Or at least get reduced down big time. Get rid of that. We'll come back and redivide that out later. This is vertical, so I don't need those edge loops there. And as a matter of fact, I can even reduce the number of sides on this somewhat. Alright, so this is a flat plane, so let's get rid of that. This is a flat plane, so we'll get rid of that. And we could reduce the number of sides down here a little bit. But let's see if we can clean a little bit of this stuff up. So I'm just going to use a target weld. Set the target, go to vertex mode. Let's just see if we can't clean a little bit of stuff up. Actually, I don't even need those lines here either. So get rid of that. Again, the main thing I'm looking at is where does the geometry change direction? And if there's no curve created, really don't need the geometry there, right? All right. terrible N-gons, but that's okay. We can come back and fix this kind of towards the end. So what I do now is do the multi-cut, and we'll just reconnect. Made a mistake. Undo this. There we go. So back, sedge, command, backspace. And before I end up destroying all these connections, we'll just kind of create new ones real fast. Boom, boom, boom. And target weld. Let's take these guys over. And then multi-cut, like so. Alright, so cool beans. Alright, so about everything on the outside has been reduced. Now we can reduce this inside here. Now, a neat thing I can do, because this is inside of a bowl, we can actually reduce this down a lot. So what I'm going to do is take multi-cut, and the first thing to do is connect two faces. So I want to take, see how there's a line running across here? I'm just going to connect these two together, and then top to bottom. Now I've got this kind of like cross pattern. And then if I want to make it like a piece of pie, we'll just connect these guys here. Like so. And then the real trick is, we'll never really notice this. We'll never see on the inside of this. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull these across. And this might not seem like a big deal, but I'm losing like 4 polygons every single time, or 3 polygons every single time I do this. So it's a nice way of optimizing a mesh. And then this could even go, say, like that. This is kind of a little more optional, but what happens is because you'll never really see down into the bowl, you can get away with a lot less geometry on the inside. So the last thing I'm going to do to this, now that we have it pretty well low polyed, is I'm going to go and do a mesh triangulate. And then that's made it all in triangles, because when we go into Unity, it's all just understand triangles anyway. And then go to, probably won't need to necessarily because it already looks smooth, but we'll go ahead and soften the edge of the normals. And then we'll go to our UV editor. And go to create, do it a planar again, make sure it's on the y-axis, hit apply. And you'll see that we now have all nice UVs, except around here and right down through there. So what I need to do is come in here, and let's go to view, do shaded, yeah, that'll work. And go to, where's my tools, and we'll go to unfold. It gives me a nice, this little unfold brush is kind of nifty. And I'm just going to paint around a little bit. Now it won't be, this won't be perfect, but what it allows me to do is it'll just kind of unfold these things a little bit. And eventually you'll see that it kind of stops wiggling, like it wiggles a lot, and then after a while it kind of settles itself down. And then if we go back and look at our, you'll be able to see that all of our squares are a lot more uniform now than they were, which is exactly what we're looking for. All right, so now that we have that, now we can now go and bake the object. So here's a low poly. our high poly. Just go ahead, edit, delete all by type history. Move this guy over. About as close as we can. Now let's go to our options. Clear all, add that selected, high poly, add selected, and bake. All right, so here's our normal map. File, save image. This is going to be shape 2, low normal. Get rid of that. Grab our low poly. Assign new material. Blend. And we'll tweak some settings. Go to bump mapping. Go to file. Tangent space normal. Last but not least, shape 2 low normal. And there you have it. So this is the low poly, that's the high poly, and for the most part you see a pretty good reproduction. There's some little errors here from where we reduced it, but there's other things that we can kind of do with that. But you'll see that overall the shape reads pretty well. So here's low, here's normal, low, normal. All right, so all you need to do is continue the same process for the rest of the objects. What I would do in the end is leave your high poly, your cage, move your low polys in a row here, and then move your textured planes sort of like this, so that everything becomes a nice even row. Save all your normal maps in the folder. Assign the materials to them, and then when you're done, just save your final file and zip it all into a thing. Good luck.